And it's time for our pre-show. We are live with today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is our pre-show. We have about 10 minutes until the top of the hour. That's when we get things started. In the meantime, I'm checking cameras. I'm making sure the recording and the streaming looks good. Recording is down here in my bottom right. The streaming looks really good. I'm getting an internet upgrade tomorrow, and I'll be running the same tests after the upgrade is complete. Always worry when they're swapping out large pieces of the infrastructure. And in my world, it's not a big piece. It's actually a relatively physically small device, which is the ONT, the optical network. Everything that we have set up here is all optical. So our optical network terminal that's in our main data center, it's a wiring closet. They're swapping out the ONT for a newer one that is going to connect to my router at 10 gig. I think the current bandwidth that I'll have from that connection will be a 2 gig pipe. But we're swapping it out. And if there's anything I love about technology, it's changing things. Hate swapping things out. It's working. It's acceptable, but there's this upgrade. And the only way to get the upgrade is replace the ONT. Thankfully, everything else stays in place. We're only swapping the ONT. That should be a relatively straightforward thing. So I'm looking forward to getting all of that done. Cameras look good. Where's my laptop? We'll make it pop back up. That looks good. Everything is good. Hey, chat room. How's everybody doing? We're doing good Security Plus stuff today. Thanks for joining us. I've got a lot to go through. All new questions, of course. It'll be fun. We'll get things started at the top of the hour. In the meantime, you're welcome to join us and to put your virtual pin in this map that's in front of me. I guess I could show you the map. Wouldn't it be better, though, if I could maybe do a picture in a picture? That would be good. There we go. So this is the map you can go to. Follow the link on the screen, the one that is right down here, professormester.com/QA, and you can put your virtual pin in our map wherever you happen to be in the world. And you can see where other people are putting pins into the map as well. It's all available there. So you're welcome to have a look. Oh, we have a lot to go through today. Lots happening. So this is great. This is all good. I always do the questions. I try to get the questions done about a week early, and I got them all done about a week early. So I don't remember any of them. I have to go back and look at what were those questions doing? What was I thinking? I think we're in good shape, though. I always try to tweak the questions based on how we did the previous week or month. And so it's a little bit back and forth here and there. Hello, Mal. Good to see you again. Folks down in St. Vincent checking in. I see you on the map. I see you down there on the map. You're checking in. Thanks for being here. It is it hot down there today? It's relatively warm here. We have a front coming through here in Central Florida where I am. And that front is it's going to cool things down. We're going to be freezing tomorrow. Just to give you an idea, tomorrow the high will be 62 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know how we're tolerating this. I'm not sure how this is working out, but I'll be wrapping up the pipes. We'll keep maybe the spigots dripping a little bit. It's how it goes. The Central Florida area is a weird place. I think it's 82 today. It's 62 tomorrow. So it's one of those situations. And I'm certainly happy for it. We have a lot of folks here that are visiting from out of town. Not in my, well, that's not entirely true. I do have people in my home visiting from out of town in Montana, and they're pretty happy to be here with this weather. And I think a lot of the people that come to Orlando just on vacation like that as well. And who can blame them right now? It's just cold other places. It's difficult to get around. It's difficult to do things. So I grew up in Florida, so we're relatively oblivious to the cold. I grew up in North Florida, though, so we do have icy days, degrees in the teens. You can't go out. The roads are iced over, that kind of thing. Doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. But here in Central Florida, there's hardly ever any ice. Very, very rare to see that. Now, it has happened this year. We did get down below freezing, so that does happen. But there's just no prep here. We don't understand what's required. The folks that are living here now in Florida that come from other places, they know, they understand, but we don't even have an infrastructure here to deal with that kind of thing. It's our solution is, well, just wait till the sun comes out and everything will be fine. And most of the time that's true. That's absolutely correct. That's usually how it works. We got about 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes for those of you checking in. Let's do one more check down here in the bottom right. Yep, we're recording. A lot of folks checking in today. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a good time. I have got a lot of new questions. Hopefully it's things that will prepare you for your Security Plus exam. That's the idea anyway. And of course, as always, there are questions that you can ask of me in the second hour. That's also available at that link that's on your screen, the one that's right here behind my back, professorbesser.com/QA. At the top is a tab. I think I turned on the Q&A. Let's make sure. You'll get to see behind the scenes here while I go into the Q&A section. Yeah. It's all there. You'll be able to submit those questions. The Q&A board is on. So we're good there. Excellent. So we'll go back to the polls. All right. We are in pretty good shape. Would I get 100% on the exam? The way I take an exam? Probably not. Probably not. Do I think I would know all the material in the exam? I think I would. But I'm just not a good test taker. I'm not a good person to sit in a room and have people ask questions of me and try to... So it really takes me some time. I really have to know it. When I walk into an exam, an industry exam, and I must have taken in my career 25, 30 different industry exams, these certification exams, I have to know it cold because there's so much anxiety when I walk in the room. I'm concerned about how much money I spent on the exam. I'm concerned about knowing the answer to the questions. I'm concerned about the temperature, everything. I'm concerned about everything. I'm concerned about world peace. I'm concerned about the weather. I'm concerned about, did I feed the dogs? There's all these things going through your head. And so I'm not a very good test taker. So I've given tips, in fact, in our live streams before about the things that I do prior to an exam or sitting in the exam room that gives me an extra 15 minutes to kind of calm down. And the quick answer to that is that they give you this candidate agreement for the CompTIA exams, and they give you like 15 minutes to read through it. You can read through it in 30 seconds, and most people don't even read through it at all. You just scroll the bottom and click OK. But for me, that's 15 minutes where I can just do nothing. I could even read it. Let's read through the candidate agreement again. And when you get all the way through it, now you kind of burned off some of the adrenaline. You're in the place now. It's a little more comfortable. You're okay. We are ready to start the exam. And then I can go into it with a little bit of a clearer head. Otherwise, I'm reading the first question. If I just jump right into it, I will read through that first question and have no idea what that language is. I mean, it looks like English, and I can read the words, but the words all put together like that don't make any sense to me. That's me doing that. What kind of mouse is this? This is a handshoe mouse. This is one of the best mice for anybody worried about just their carpal tunnel, or I just have a problem because I have this big hand. I mean, it's not enormous, but it's, I can get an octave and a key or two up, C to E, I think I can do on a piano. So it's a relatively big hand. So you have these tiny little mice, and and I try to use them, and it's like I'm a declaw. I can't use them out. At the end of the day, it hurts. So this, you just put your whole hand on. If you want to see what all this stuff is, it's over on our website. You can go to professormesser.com/studio, and I document all the things that we use. Hey, look, it's top of the hour, 12 noon. Let's see if our Keynote is working. I'm looking for green light. Come on, Keynote. You can do it. No green light at all. There we go. Green light. Let's get that going. That looks good. This looks good. This looks good. Let's do a live stream, everybody. I think we can make this happen. This will be fun. Let's click a button, and here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2025 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. That's the version of the Security Plus exam that we will be talking about today. We have so many new questions and information to go through today, and perhaps things that perhaps you didn't know about the Security Plus exam. If you're planning to take your Security Plus, you're in the right place. If you're here live, we would love for you to join us live. One of the things that you can do, and I mean join us live sort of in the virtual sense, here's how you can do this. Pop open a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can not only submit your questions for the things that, or your answers for the questions that I'll be giving today, but you could submit questions for our second hour. So this first hour, you'll be answering questions. In the second hour, I will. And you can put any questions you would like into that list, and I will be more than glad to answer them. For those of you that have joined us before, one of the things that you might remember is we have these questions that we do. And one of the questions, just to see if you're able to get to the link to answer these questions, you should pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer these questions that we have here. And I have for you a question from last month that you should go through to figure out maybe, perhaps, if this is working the way you would expect. It's always a good test. The question from last month, we call our rewind question, is this one that asks, a security engineer received an alert showing a change to the corporate web server configuration file. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Now, the rules that we have for the study group always remain the same. It is please no answers in the chat room, please no hints in the chat room. So the possible questions for this, or the answers for this, are FEM, IPS, NGFW, IPsec VPN, and NAC. So a security engineer received an alert showing a change to the corporate web server configuration file. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Would it be a FEM, IPS, NGFW, IPsec VPN, or a NAC? We will come back to this question in just a moment. Mull that over. If you think you know the answer, please visit the website that you see right here, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. We do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. We also do A+ study groups, Network Plus study groups. We always have a good time not only doing the Q&A, I think we have a pretty good time in the second hour where you get to ask me questions. And you can, of course, go to professormesser.com/QA and submit those questions at any time during this first hour. When we are not here live, you can always find us online. Our entire video course for Security Plus is available on our website and on YouTube for no cost whatsoever. It's absolutely free. Every minute of every video. You can go to professormesser.com/YouTube and watch the entire playlist. We also have weekly Security Plus pop quiz questions. You can find those on Twitter, on X, whatever you'd like to call it, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and we'll email them to you. So we'll find you wherever you are, and we will send these questions to you. You can sign up on our website if you would like to get those questions in your email inbox every week. I will also remind you, I had a question about this very morning. People were saying, should I worry about retirement dates for Security Plus? Let's look at the tail of the tape for Security Plus. The SY0-701 is the current version of the Security Plus exam. It was released on November the 7th of 2023, which means we expect it to still be around and probably retire somewhere around May of 2027. So as we sit here in February of 2025, you still have plenty of time before you ever have to worry about this exam going anywhere. You're in the right place. You're studying the right version of the exam. Make sure you have a look at your timing for this, but I think most of us can probably get this done by May of 2027. Keep checking those dates on the CompTIA website. They will always keep you up to date for what the official dates might be. To earn your Security Plus certification, It's a single exam, 90 minutes in length, and a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions. Most of us probably do get fewer than 90 questions, but the 90 minutes is an important part. Time management's very important on this exam. That's a lot of questions in a very short period of time. So just one of those things to practice. The score that you need to earn is a 750, and it's on an unusual scale between 100 and 900. So that is an unusual way to do this. Plus, every question is worth a different number of points. You're never quite sure how many questions you have to get right to pass this exam. My recommendation is just not to worry about it. My recommendation is that you focus on getting everything right that you can. The final score will work itself out at the end anyway. Now, if you are familiar with previous versions of this exam, like the 601 exam, everything is exactly the same. It's the same format. So there's multiple choice questions. There's performance-based questions. We will do both of those style of questions today in this live stream, so you'll have some feel for what those things are like. Don't forget that although our entire course, our video course, is available for free online, we have other materials that might also help you with your studies. A good example of that is our Success Bundle, the one you see here. Our videos are available for download in the Success Bundle. I have MP3 versions of those videos that we've created if you're in your car or listening while you're working out. I have course notes, I have practice exams, and so much more. It's all on our website. You can learn more about this at professormesser.com/701SB. I'll also let you know that although a video replay of this will be available immediately afterwards, some folks like having that audio podcast available. It is distributed in podcast format. So if you have a favorite podcast listening program that you like to use, you can simply visit professormesser.com/podcast to add it to your list. If you listen in a streaming audio service such as Spotify, all you have to do is search for Professor Messer on Spotify. You'll find all of our podcasts there as well. Plenty to go through. And of course, all of our previous SY0-701 study groups have different questions on them. This isn't the same question every month. We make all new questions every single month. So you can go back, in some case, years, and listen in as long as it matches the version of the exam that you're planning to take. And right now for our 701 study groups, we go back a couple of years. So you're able to get quite a bit of information even on the replays. Something that might be useful if you're really preparing and getting ready to take this exam. You will also notice that about a day after we're done, the YouTube video description will be almost magically updated with timestamps. That's because my marketing manager, Lori, is listening to this replay right now. Not really right now, but to her, it's right now. Hi, Lori. She's listening in probably at 2x speed and putting down all of these timestamps so that you can go back to this afterwards and find exactly what you're looking for. You can click on the timestamp and jump right to that spot in the video. It's a very quick way to find what you need. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. And if you use this and you like it, please feel free to give Lori a shout out in the chat so she can see that in the chat replay as well. Speaking of chat, when we are not here on this live stream, you can always catch me in our Discord chat. We're available there. You can find myself and thousands of other people that have registered on our Discord that are studying their A+, their Network+, their Security+, and other certifications. And there is a group of folks that have already gone through this before. They're very familiar with the content, and they're just hanging out to help other technology people learn what they need to learn and sort of give back to those groups that are trying to get into the industry and do what we do every day. Find that on our Discord. Go to professormesser.com/Discord to find out more about that. At some point, you will need to take this exam, and it does cost a little bit of money. Now, you can go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price, but I have those same vouchers available on my site. If you happen to live in Canada, US, or a US territory, those are available to you at professormesser.com/vouchers. They're already discounted. You don't need a discount code. You don't have to do anything special, and certainly don't need to add any extensions into your browser, thankfully. If you do purchase the voucher on my website, I'll even give you a little bit extra. I'll give you something you can't even buy from my site. This is only available if you get a Success Bundle or a voucher. It's my Exam Hacks ebook. This provides you with a series of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years that can help you with the study process. I even have strategies you can use during the exam itself that could possibly make you a couple of extra points. Something you might want to read through as you are preparing to take this exam. You can find out more about these vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier. The question was, a security engineer received an alert showing a change to the corporate web server configuration file. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Would it be a FIM, an IPS, an NGFW, an IPsec VPN, or a NAC? What did you choose? Let's close the poll and find out. See how you did. 65% of you normally have this set up to show this to me in a different format, like the pie chart. There we go. 66% of us show that it is the FIM that provides that information. We have 15% that say IPS, and then we're down to single digits. 8% said NAC, 6% said a next generation firewall, and 5% said an IPsec VPN. Well, if you're seeing a message that a file or some information, an important document has been changed, configuration file has been updated, an executable has been modified, that's because you're probably monitoring these files with a file integrity monitoring system. This is sometimes a piece of software that's running on a server. Very often, it is a service that is running on a server. You configure it with certain files that you want to monitor so that if anything changes these files, because after all, once you set up a web server, a lot of the infrastructure of that web server doesn't ever change. Configuration files certainly don't change. You know when configuration files do change? When a hacker gets into your system. So this is a great way to give you some feedback that something has changed. Something has changed within me. We're not sure what's going on there, but we will find out because we were notified with our file integrity monitoring system. There are a few of these available. Some are available in Windows. There's an on-demand file integrity check you can do with a utility known as SFC, System File Checker. This is why if you're ever infected with malware and you need to get that system up and running enough to perhaps back up some other files that are on here, you can run SFC and update all of the things that may have been changed with your core operating system files. We also have in Linux, a very popular one through the years is Tripwire. It is monitoring configuration files, Linux files, other information in the file system, and it will let you know if anything changed. And depending on the type of system that you're running and the type of platforms that you have, you might have a number of host-based intrusion prevention systems, or this might even be baked into your existing antivirus or anti-malware system. So have a look at what options you might have for file integrity monitoring, as we say here in the South. And that is exactly the answer we were looking for. 66% of you did choose that one. That is the correct answer. IPS, in its traditional form of a network-based intrusion prevention system, it does not look for files that are changing because normally an IPS is looking at traffic going across the network. As we do know, if this is a host-based IPS, you might have file integrity monitoring available, but that's not always the case with an IPS, so a FIM would be a better answer. And of course, this question asks, which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? 100% of the time it's a FIM, only part of the time would it be an IPS. That makes an FIM, file integrity monitoring, the right answer. Next generation firewalls don't look at files that are on a system. IPsec VPNs are designed to encrypt data going across between two devices. That's not something we would use to be able to receive an alert about a file that has changed. And a NAC, N-A-C, that is network access control. That is about authentication and providing you with access to the proper resources once you log into a network. So in this case, the best answer, the only one that really makes sense, and the one that 66% of you chose, is file integrity monitoring. That is the right answer. Some of you remember that from last month. Well done. That's the way you do it right there, is to get better numbers than what we had last month. I feel like we did some good here today. That's always a good feeling, right? Now let's shift gears a little bit, because as many of you know, when you take these exams, the first set of questions you get on the exam, the first handful of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice. So that is a little bit of a challenge what type of questions do you get at the beginning of the exam? Well, effectively anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could be drag and drop. They could be a matching question. You could put things in a particular order. They might, well, in the Security Plus, they wouldn't put you at a command prompt because there are no command prompt questions or exam objectives on the Security Plus exam any longer. But there could be other types of questions. So you need to be prepared for anything. And as I tell people, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question if you know the material. They can ask it any way they'd like. You know the content, you can answer the question. Today, I have for you a question that perhaps you will be able to answer the content on. This is a matching question, and the question asks to match the best security technology to the description. So I have for you 5 different descriptions, and I have 7 security technologies. That means 2 will be left over. So it's possible, even after doing all of this, that you could get none of these correct. This is a very common way to ask these questions on the exam, by the way. So let's talk about these descriptions. The 5 descriptions are: a cache of remote website content is stored locally. The next one is: a known vulnerability is blocked at the internet ingress point. The third one is: all users must authenticate before they can send network traffic. The fourth one is: all company web server certificates are centrally stored. And the last one is: a single website is serviced by multiple web server instances. The 7 different technologies that you need to somehow fit into those 5 different slots are IPS, TPM, proxy server, MDM, 802.1x, load balancer, and HSM. Obviously, you're only going to use 5 of those. There will be 2 left over at the end. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to lock in your answer by visiting the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. For those of you listening again on the podcast side, those 5 descriptions are: a cache of remote website content is stored locally. A known vulnerability is blocked at the internet ingress point. All users must authenticate before they can send network traffic. All company web server certificates are centrally stored, and a single website is serviced by multiple web server instances. So, which ones fit into this mix? Is it IPS, TPM, proxy server, MDM, 802.1x, load balancer, or HSM? And I see a number of people already submitting their answers to the link that you see on your screen at professormesser.com/QA. See how well you know which one of these would fit with these technologies. I did try to fit, as you can tell, 5 technologies that can only be matched by one of those on the other side. But there are some of these technologies that have a slight overlap associated with them, and that's why you'll notice that at the top it says match the best security technology to the description, not any technology to the description. And you are only choosing a single option. Since there are 7 options and 5 descriptions, there will be 2 options left over at the end. So for extra credit, whichever ones are left over at the end, make sure you know what those technologies do as well. We can create our own descriptions from there. And I think we will once we are done with this. We'll see if what you think that technology is really is how you would apply it into a practical use. So this is where you would go to answer these questions. This is a relatively common way on the exam to ask these types of questions. There are a number of different performance-based questions on the exam. They change the style and the method that they use. They change the question and answer method all the time. And so it's important that you know the exam objectives. And as I mentioned before, if you know the objectives, they could put this in a matching question. They could put it in a fill-in-the-blank question. They could make it a drag-and-drop question. They have a lot of different ways to ask about these technologies. Just make sure you're familiar with them, and perhaps more importantly, how these technologies are designed to be used. That is a common theme on the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus exams, that you have to know how to apply these technologies. They're not looking for you to simply be able to look at an acronym and know what those letters stand for. Although there might be some value to that, that's not what CompTIA is looking for. They're looking to see if you look at an abbreviation, what does that abbreviation do? What does it mean? How do you use it? This is a really good example for doing something like that. So hopefully that will give you some ideas of how to approach this particular question. Let's step through each one of these descriptions and see if we can match them up, shall we? We will start right now with this one right here. A cache of remote website content is stored locally. So we want to be able to not only access remote website content, but what if we could store it in a local cache so that we don't have to constantly go across the internet to grab information that rarely changes? Of the list of technologies that we had, the only one that really fits that particular requirement to a T would be a proxy server. Now, obviously, the proxy server, its primary job is to make requests on our behalf. So we would like to go to ProfessorMesser.com. This proxy server sits in the middle of our communication. You're really talking to the proxy server. The proxy server then looks at your request. Oh, you would like to go to ProfessorMesser.com? Well, I see in my list that that is an acceptable website, so I will allow this conversation, because if it wasn't an acceptable website, you probably get a message back on your screen that says you can't visit that website. So there are some nice security controls built into proxy servers. The proxy server will then make that request on your behalf to ProfessorMesser.com. It will come back. That proxy server will evaluate what was received to make sure there's no malicious JavaScript or anything else that might be a little bit unusual in that traffic. It will then store a copy of that information locally, that's the caching, and then provide you with the results of what came back from that web server. So it sits in the middle. It's the mommy and daddy in the conversation. It's checking on things. Well, we're not going to give you that candy until we look at it. Everything looks okay here. You can have that candy. So that is exactly the situation that occurs thousands and thousands and thousands of times a second with these proxy servers and these very busy networks. And so having that cache available means the next person who sends information wanting to go to ProfessorMesser.com, they will be able to also to just simply retrieve that information directly from the proxy server, which makes the conversation so much more fast, and of course does not use additional bandwidth on the internet link. Let's do the next one, which is a known vulnerability is blocked at the internet ingress point. Well, there are many places where you can block known vulnerabilities. I mentioned an internet ingress point because that's a very common place to put an intrusion prevention system, or IPS. An intrusion prevention system is designed to look through network traffic. It's designed to find network patterns that match known vulnerabilities, and if it identifies one of those patterns, it blocks the network traffic before it ever gets inside. It is a remarkable technology that works extremely well, and if you're someone who is concerned about someone attacking known vulnerabilities in Windows, in Linux, with certain applications, the way that you would be able to defeat these attacks is with an intrusion prevention system. And quite honestly, most next-generation firewalls already have IPS functionality built within them anyway. If you're not using it, you should turn on those capabilities. They're very, very useful. Next on our list is all users must authenticate before they can send network traffic. Authentication prior to sending network traffic sounds like a pretty good security feature to me. And the best match for that would be 802.1x. The X here is not a placeholder for something. That's the actual name of the specification, of the standard. 802.1 is the IEEE committee, and the version of 802.1 that is associated with this functionality is version X, which in this case you'll notice is a capital X to designate that it is a full standard and not just an addendum to an existing standard. 802.1x is often referred to as Network Access Control, NAC. And this is one that if you are ever on a corporate network, you turn on your computer, you may notice the first thing it asks you is for your username and password, and it won't connect you to the network until you provide that. That is because that the administrator of that network has turned on 802.1x, and they're not going to allow you to simply plug in and start sending traffic. you first have to authenticate with your proper credentials, and only then you can send traffic on the network. If you're running a corporate network and you don't have 802.1x configured, installed, and running, I don't know what you're doing. You need to get that up to date. Make sure you're using 802.1x. It is a very useful and very valuable security tool. Next on our list is all company web server certificates are centrally stored. This is one that could go a number of different directions depending on your knowledge of this content. I think most of you probably have a pretty good idea because you're working with Security Plus, but that would be an HSM, hardware security module. Hardware security modules are usually hardened devices that sit in the core of a data center, and their purpose is to collect and store all of these important keys into a device that nobody can access unless they really, really, really have access to these things. A hardware security module. You can think of this as many, many, many devices, hundreds or even thousands of devices can store private keys and certificates on this hardware security module. It's a great place to keep that and maintain it and manage it, and everything is in one place rather than having all of those certificates and private keys scattered about different servers all over your infrastructure. So a very important and very useful security tool in itself. And then lastly, a single website is serviced by multiple web server instances. If you're visiting ProfessorMesser.com right now, then you are using one of these, a load balancer. We actually have multiple web servers behind the scenes, and when you access our site, my load balancer decides which one of these servers should we send your request to, and that's the one that you use for the duration of that session. That means that if I lose a web server or I need to reboot a web server, I need to make a change to a web server and take it offline, I can do that and we'll still be up and running. You won't even know that anything changed because my load balancer makes sure that you are getting access to the proper resources. So if that is the answers we were looking for, a cache of remote website content is stored locally as a proxy server. A known vulnerability blocked at the internet ingress point is an IPS. All users authenticating before they can send network traffic is thanks to 802.1x. A company web server certificate centrally stored in a hardware security module. And we've got a single website serviced by multiple web server instances. That would be a load balancer. So the one that we did not use, or the two that we did not use, let's start with the first one, a TPM, Trusted Platform Module. This is one I stuck in there to, quite honestly, to be a little bit cheeky. I know a number of you have gone through and looked at our video that talk about HSMs and TPMs. A hardware security module is a device that many hundreds or thousands of devices can store these private and personal cryptography, certificates, private keys, and other information on. A trusted platform module is usually a component that is on your motherboard of a single device that manages cryptographic functions for just that one device. So this is a great situation where, let's say you have a web server. Inside of your web server, you probably have a TPM that's really not being used for the web server piece. It may be used for some type of full disk encryption when you start up that web server, however. And then once the web server starts, it grabs a certificate from the HSM that is somewhere on the network so that your web server can start up and use HTTPS and be able to perform encryption for the web server communication. So make sure you know the differences between a TPM, which is for a single machine, and an HSM that can be used across hundreds or even thousands of devices to provide different cryptographic functions for different purposes. It's one of those where it's similar, but it's different as well. You do have to know what those differences are and how they apply to all of this. The other one we didn't use in this list was an MDM, a mobile device manager. For those of you that have your mobile phones and they are managed by a third party, these mobile phones have to have some type of centralized management, and an MDM is a perfect device, perfect solution to be able to provide that centralized management. You can push out updates from the MDM. You can add applications to people's mobile devices. You can lock down certain aspects of how that device can be used. A lot of functionality in an MDM. We have a great video on that one that takes you through a number of screens of an MDM and give you a feel for what a mobile device manager would actually do with a device like that. So that is our performance-based question of the day, hopefully of the month. Hopefully you got a number of those correct. For those of you in the chat that were asking if we got some of them correct, do we get partial credit? CompTIA does have a frequently asked questions on their website that mentions that on occasion, perhaps, sometimes, they could possibly provide you with partial credit of a performance-based question. But they also say, we're not going to tell you when that is, and sometimes we don't give you partial credit for a performance-based question. So it's an answer, but it's not an answer. The answer is a definitive maybe, is what we got from CompTIA. My recommendation is, obviously, don't worry about it, because your final score won't tell you if you got partial credit or not. It won't tell you if you got it right or not. You don't get any feedback at that level on your final score. So don't worry about it. My opinion of this is, if you have no control over it, this is not something you should waste your time on. Worry about the content. Worry about the exam objectives. Worry about what could be asked of you, and then it doesn't really matter if you got partial credit or not, because you probably got everything right. The whole key is to get through this exam with the score you need to pass. Make sure you study those exam objectives, and then you don't have to worry about any of those things. Let's shift gears now back to a multiple choice-based question, shall we? That will probably feel pretty good for most of us. Our next question, this multiple choice question, asks, two companies have agreed to sign a BPA. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this agreement? Would it be keep information confidential between parties, remove private information on request, reserve a disaster recovery location, start a business together, or perform ongoing security audits? If you think you know what the question is, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put questions into the chat. Please do not put any hints into the chat. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen to submit your answer. The question again is, two companies have agreed to sign a BPA, Bravo Papa Alpha. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this agreement? Would it be to keep information confidential between parties, remove private information on request, reserve a disaster recovery location, start a business together, or perform ongoing security audits? You think you know the answer? Lock it in. A lot of people locking their answers in really quick. I'm watching the numbers go up very quick. And I never know if that means we really know the answer or we so do not know the answer that we're just sort of putting anything in. So we'll figure out what that is in just a moment. I think if you, maybe some of these, you know what they are, and they are not a BPA, and you can take them off your list. So the calculatus limitatus can really help you an awful lot on these particular exam questions, so that even if you don't know what BPA is, you certainly know what these other things are, and that might be able to get rid of one or two of these, which gives you a better chance of getting it right. It's all about statistics at that point. It's all about you randomly picking the right one, and maybe your random number generator is working great. We'll figure out that as we go through it. This is a pretty good one. Let's see how you did on this one. The question again asks, two companies have agreed to sign a BPA. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this agreement? Is it to keep information confidential between parties, remove private information on request, reserve a disaster recovery location, start a business together, or perform ongoing security audits? Let's see what you chose. We can see that 48% of you say the answer is to start a business together. We've got 26% of you that say keep information confidential between parties, and 20% that say perform ongoing security audits. Only 4% said reserve a disaster recovery location, and only 1% said remove private information on request. So really we have three here, one that has 48%, 26%, and 20%. Those three are taking the bulk of the answers that are here. Well, you need to know what a number of different agreements are. They are listed in a presentation that I have about agreement types, because there's so many different agreements we need to know about. When you get into the world of IT security, one of the things you'll notice is that it's not all about reading log files. It's also a lot about process and procedure. And one of the most important sets of processes and procedures is the ones that we have here with a business partners agreement, a BPA. Business partner agreement is one that two organizations, when they are planning to work together, especially when they're planning to really go into business, not just have a very loose partnership, but they're really setting some very specific guidelines as to how these two businesses will interoperate, how these two businesses will share in the costs, how these two businesses will share in the profit. We need to make sure those things are documented. There needs to be a contract along those lines, and a business partners agreement gives you a perspective into that particular world. This also determines who's in charge. If you have two businesses that are working together, it's difficult for two people to run one single effort. We need one person that makes the decisions. Maybe we document that in our BPA as well. And if you run into problems, who's going to pick up all of the slack? Who gets to pay for it? If there's a disaster, who handles the costs of that disaster? If there's some type of odd financial issue and you need to have audits done, who gets to pay for the audit? Who gets to be responsible for those? That's all documented along with many, many, many other things in the business partners agreement, or the BPA. That's what we were looking for. In fact, many of you, 48% of you, said start a business together. Close enough to 50 that I'll say it's a majority. It's close enough. Technically a plurality, but we'll go with that. It's close enough to 50. 26% to say keep information confidential between parties. And although a BPA may have some level of that within it, that's really most specifically talking about a non-disclosure agreement, or an NDA. Non-disclosure agreements are exactly that. They are designed to tell everybody that what you're about to see cannot leave this room. It cannot leave your brain. You cannot tell anyone about it. It's one of those situations where confidentiality is very important. I've been on both sides of the table with these confidentiality agreements, and I've had to sign NDAs as a customer. When a company came in and said, we have new product coming out, we want to show you what's in the new product, but we don't want you to talk about it. So sign this NDA. So we sign the NDA, and then they can show us the new stuff that's not released yet. We also have situations where I've been on the other side. I've been the company with the new product and have had customers sign an NDA so that I could tell them the stuff that's coming in the new version. Very common way to do it. There's lots of ways to use an NDA, lots of things you could do with it, but that's what we were referring to. 26% of you chose that option. 20% said perform ongoing security audits. There are a number of different agreements that are important for security audits, not just professional services type agreements, and there are multiple professional services agreements you need to know about. They are in that same presentation on agreement types. That's section 5.3 of the exam objectives. So make sure you go back and look at those to get more familiarity with them. 4% of you said reserve a disaster recovery location, not associated with the BPA. And then remove private information on request. That's more of that might be a mandate. That might be a law, like a GDPR that we have in the EU. That would be a good example of how you would have to remove some private information on request. So if you happen to be in the EU or the UK, you may be able to take advantage of the general data protection information, or the acts that are available, the laws that have been set up so that you can decide whether your information stays on that site or not. It's in your hands and you have complete control over that. We don't technically have anything to that level in the United States, at least not yet. Maybe we'll get to that point eventually so we can work through those. Hopefully you answered that one right. The answer, again, is the one that 48% of you chose. Start a business together as a business partners agreement. That would be the answer that we were looking for. Let's do another question. I have another one ready for you. This one asks, a developer has built an application with extensive use of data masking. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Is it undeniable proof of the data source, hides sensitive data on the screen, automatically encrypts stored data, ensures a unique hash for each data record, and hides private data within another media type? You might recognize some of these. All of these are things you do need to know that come directly from the exam objectives, but that is a very good place to go to figure out maybe what some of these might be or what the wrong answer might be. You can get that out of the list. The question again asks, a developer has built an application with extensive use of data masking. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Is it an undeniable proof of the data source, hides sensitive data on the screen, automatically encrypts stored data, ensures a unique hash for each data record, or hides private data within another media type? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and see if you know which one that might be. That would be pretty good to help understand what those are. Maybe this is familiar to you. Maybe some of these things that you have worked with before, maybe some of these technologies are something you can remember, and maybe you'll know what they are, and maybe you'll know what they're not. A lot of you putting in those answers, they're going really, really, really quick. So I think we'll be able to break this one down and see if you were able to maybe get rid of the things you know it is not, and then it makes it easier to figure out which one it might be. Since a lot of you locked in your question, let's see if you got it right. The question again asks, a developer has built an application with extensive use of data masking. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be undeniable proof of the data source, hides sensitive data on the screen, automatically encrypts stored data, ensures a unique hash for each data record, or hides private data within another media type? We're going to close our poll and see how you did. And this one had a big number, 69% of you say it hides sensitive data on the screen. We have 11% that say it ensures a unique hash for each data record. 11% also said hides a private data within another media type. And 8% says automatically encrypts stored data. So it's almost a three-way tie for second place, which means in last place we have 1% that say it is an undeniable proof of the data source. So this is a pretty good one to figure out. We obviously have a very large number that says it hides sensitive data on the screen. So let's talk about data masking. Data masking is when information that's normally shown to us is in some way obfuscated. It is hidden from us. It appears in a way that is either impossible to know what was really there or is very, very difficult for us to know. So if you were, for example, a very good example of this that I think many of us are familiar with is we have a receipt that we got from a store. We paid with a credit card or a debit card. So that's a pretty important set of numbers that you don't want somebody else to have. So even though the person who took your credit card has that information that they used to perform the transaction, when you look at your receipt, you'll notice most of the numbers of your card are masked. They are masked out. They usually use asterisks. Asterisks for masking, making it very difficult to talk for this particular question. And usually it's the last 4 digits of the card number that are listed so that you could go back to your records and go, oh yes, it was that card that I used, not this other one, because I can see the last 4 numbers. Obviously, the other numbers in the card, completely impossible to know what they are because they have been replaced with a bunch of asterisks in this particular scenario. This could be used to protect anything, of course. It doesn't have to be credit card numbers. It could be part of your name. It could be part of your email address. It could be almost anything. And the idea is that we're hiding it. In this case, we're hiding it from people who might get their hands on your receipt. A lot of people throw their receipts away. Somebody was to go through the garbage and pull out your receipt, you would not want them to have access to your credit card number. Therefore, we mask it on the receipt. This is a very good way not just to protect your personal data, protect your financial data as well. This could be done in a lot of different ways, but the most common way is to simply replace it with something that is very obviously a mask. But this could have been a different set of numbers. Instead of asterisks, it could have just had 111111111, and then at the very end, it would have the last 4 digits of your number. It's not a very good mask to use for something that already is a bunch of numbers, but you get the idea. You could just replace it with anything. It'd be smiley faces. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, 2512. Just something so that it doesn't show the actual number. That's all we're looking for. I like the idea of a smiley face. We should put that on receipts now. I'll work on that. It gives me something to do. So that was the answer we were looking for. It is something that the 69% of you said hides sensitive data on the screen, on a receipt, in something that other people can see. So that is exactly the answer that we were looking for. 11% of you said hides private data within another media type. That is almost clearly talking about steganography, where you're taking some type of media and hiding it with other types of media. In our video on steganography, we even show you on how you could take a data file, a spreadsheet, important data, hide it within an image, for example. You can do the same thing with video. You can do the same thing with voice and vice versa. 11% of you said ensures a unique hash for each data record. That is not what the data masking is used for. That is really just hashing. That's something that's very commonly done for different data records to ensure that nothing changes with them. And if you ever get into the world of any type of data forensics, you'll be doing a lot of data hashing. You'll be doing a lot of digital signatures. Speaking of digital signatures, 1% of you said undeniable proof of the data source. Has nothing to do with data masking. That really is talking about a digital signature. That obviously didn't fool many of you. Only 1% of you chose that one. And then automatically encrypts stored data. That would be some type of full disk encryption or database level encryption or file level encryption, something else that would be automatic. In this particular case, very useful to have that encryption, by the way. But in this case, we're talking about data masking, which is not the same thing as encryption. We're not encrypting the data. We're just hiding it, which in this case means that we can't recover the data later on. We have to have that data somewhere else if we ever want to recover it. So the answer here very clearly, 69% of you say hide sensitive data on the screen. Got that one absolutely right. That is the right answer. You guys are spot on with knowing what those are. As you can already tell, the Security Plus exam has so much inside of it. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different exam objectives that you have to memorize for this exam. And one of the things that we do is we have an entire video course where you can watch videos that go through every single one of those exam objectives. When you're done, of course, when you've gone through 121 videos over 15 hours of information, you may find you don't have enough time to go through every video. Or how do you remember what was on video number 1 if you went all the way through video number 121? One way that you might get a little bit of help is with a set of course notes. These course notes, I went through every single video and I documented all of the text that's in the video, all the important charts that are in the video, anything inside that might be associated with working through these diagrams of how things operate, verifying a digital signature. You've got documents and graphics that describe important topics. Those are important to know. So make sure you are familiar with them. These are extremely useful. And notice they are in the same structure format as the official exam objectives, and they're in the same format and numbers as I use on my website. So section 1.2 for Zero Trust is also the same as section 1.2 in your exam objectives, where they describe zero trust. So it's very easy to find things in all of these different places. Those are my course notes. Here's where they are. You just saw the digital version. We also have a physical version of the course notes. You get me twice on the screen here because I just didn't hit the right button. So these are the same course notes, but they're in a printed form in what we call a perfect bound format. So sort of like a softback book, because that's what it is, but it is in full color. 8.5 by 11, so it's nice and big for those lots of text and lots of graphics and lots of things you might look at. If you get the physical edition, which is this printed book, you also get the digital edition at no additional cost, which means that you can download the digital edition immediately after purchase, just like everybody does. But you also, while you're waiting on the physical edition to arrive, you'll have a digital edition that you can start reading. So another thing that might help you, if this is something you might think might help with your studies, something you would like to use to follow along with our videos, you'll find copies of this available to purchase over at professormesser.com/701cn. And it's another great way to support the things that we do here at professormesser.com. Let's do another question. We've got more available to you. This next question asks, a hacker is using a cryptographic attack to gain access to system data. Which of the following would be the most likely attack type? Would this be DDoS, downgrade, SQLI, on-path, or spraying? It's got to be one of these, right? A hacker is using a cryptographic attack to gain access to system data. Which of the following would be the most likely attack type? Would it be DDoS, downgrade, SQLI, on-path, or spraying? If you think you know the answer, there's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to submit your answer at any time using that link. If you're watching this on the replay, obviously that link won't be available, but you can remember what your answer is. You can see if you get that one right on the next one that goes through. We'll have to find out what this is. All of these are attack types that you need to know for the exam. They are listed in the exam objectives. So as you're going through these, maybe you know what the answer is. Maybe this one was an easy one for you and you were able to zero right in on what the right answer was. One of the things you might want to do is also look at the other attack types that are here, and you might want to perhaps consider looking at maybe understanding how those would be used. What does somebody use to make that attack type work? I'll have to figure out what that is in just a moment. Let's see how you did with this one. A hacker is using a cryptographic attack to gain access to system data. Which of the following would be the most likely attack type? Would it be DDoS, downgrade, SQLI, on-path, or spraying? Let's see what you answered. We will stop this right now and see what the answers are that you chose. And we're a little torn. Our pie is split up into different pieces. 29% say the answer is SQL injection. We have 23% that say downgrade attack, 21% that say on-path attack, 19% that say spraying, and 7% that say DDoS. Well, which one is it? Which one is using a cryptographic form of attack to be able to do this? And if you look through the 5 different attack types that are here, I chose these 5 attack types very, very carefully because only one of them had any perspective of cryptographic attack every single time. Like every time it went after data, it always was a cryptographic attack, and that would be a downgrade attack. A downgrade attack is taking some form of protection and downgrading it so that it is weak enough that an attacker can then circumvent the protection. This is exactly what you would be using. A good example of a cryptographic form of this downgrade attack is SSL stripping. This is where someone is connecting to a web server using TLS or SSL. We just generically call it SSL. Just assume whenever I use the word SSL that I really am referring to TLS. It's sort of a colloquialism within the industry. Just an odd thing that we do within the industry is we sometimes don't call things what they are. So even though TLS is something that does work with this, SSL stripping can be done in other forms of encryption as well. So this is not just with SSL, even though we call it SSL stripping. That is one where you would connect securely to a web server, but if there is someone in the middle or some device or some process in the middle that can modify it, then it will perform this type of downgrade so that the victim's browser page may not get any encrypted data at all, allowing the attacker to be able to view what's on the inside. Well, we'll come back to that question in just a second. Hopefully now you already know what the answer is for the next one, right? You've already seen that one. Downgrade attacks are very, very common for someone who has not updated the technology that they're using for encryption. So that's something you would absolutely want to do. SSL stripping does come in handy to be able to make that happen. So if we look at this list, the downgrade attack, that was 23% of you chose that particular option. Why would it not be one of these others? what other type of attack on here uses cryptography? You'll find that none of them reliably do. So let's take them one at a time. We have 29% that said SQL injection. If you watch my video on SQL injection, you can see that you're just typing things in at a browser. There's no cryptography involved there. There's no special keys that you need. There's no brute forcing of anything. You are simply using SQL code to circumvent a front end of a web-based application. So SQLI is referring to SQL injection, structured query language injection. No cryptography being used for that. That is not a cryptographic attack. That is just someone being clever. So that is one that would not apply in this particular case. We have on-path attack. And although the example I gave you of a SQL, of an SSL stripping had a component of on-path to it, the on-path part was not the cryptographic part. On-path just means somebody is sitting in the middle of a conversation. And in fact, if you look at my video on on-path attacks, I give you a really good example of that, which would be ARP spoofing. Another good example of how you can get in the middle of a conversation, no cryptography involved at all. Nothing special. In fact, you were just taking advantage of ARP and the lack of security associated with ARP, the address resolution protocol. So on-path attacks may not even have any type of cryptographic functionality built into them. That would not be the most likely attack type of these 5 if we're talking about a cryptographic attack. So although 21% of you chose that one, that would not be the correct answer. 19% said spraying. Spraying is when you would try a password for a username to see if it's right. It's effectively a very slow brute force, because instead of doing brute force attack after brute force attack, let's try ninja. Let's try football. Let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's just go through the list of popular passwords to see which one hits. The problem, of course, is if you do this more than 3, 4, 5 times, you're very quickly going to lock out that account and most likely send an alert message to the security team. So instead of doing that, you try it twice. You try ninja, you try password. Did either of those work? None of them worked. We'll go to another account. We'll try a different account. Because we know that 2 bad passwords is not going to set off any alarms. So that's the idea behind spraying, is we try what we think it is, and if we, after the first couple tries, don't get it, we go to the next thing. Maybe we come back in 24 hours and try 2 more. Probably one of the slowest ways to brute force, but probably one of the more effective ways to brute force an account. Find that password. And then lastly, 7% of you, practically no one, said a distributed denial of service attack. That's just an overwhelm of someone. If you're suddenly overwhelmed with information, that is a distributed denial of service attack coming from multiple devices. Again, no cryptographic issue with that. Maybe all of these devices are simply accessing a single web page. There's nothing cryptographic in those at all. Certainly there could be, but this question wasn't about what could be. It's about which one of these choices would be the most likely one. And in this particular case, the most likely one we're dealing with a cryptographic attack is a downgrade attack. 23% of you chose that one. And those of you that chose that one got it absolutely correct. Well, in a answer or a question that should be not a surprise for anyone, because you've already seen this pop up on the screen once already, let's do this multiple choice question that asks, a download page includes the download link and a long string of hexadecimal characters. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for displaying this information? Would it be a decryption key, file metadata, integrity verification, key escrow, or authentication password? It's got to be one of these, right? A download page includes the download link and a long string of hexadecimal characters. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for displaying this information? Would it be decryption key, file metadata, integrity verification, key escrow, or authentication password? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what this one happens to be. This might be a good one to focus in on if you are trying to determine which one would be this particular answer to this particular question. In fact, you may have seen this before on a download link, and you may be thinking to yourself, why was there this long string of hexadecimal characters there? We'll have to figure that one out. Well, you'll know in a moment. Notice we're not answering this one quite as fast as the other ones were. We'll have to see how that translates into the answers that we get. I think I'm hoping that we jump back to big numbers based on what we did in that last question anyway. This is our bounce back question to see how well we do and see if it's really something we know or something we're guessing at. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a download page includes the download link and a long string of hexadecimal characters. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for displaying this issue? Would it be a decryption key, file metadata, integrity verification, key escrow, or authentication password? Let's stop our poll and see how we do with this one. Got big numbers. 59% say it's integrity verification. We've got 17% that say decryption key and 17% that said file metadata. We also have 4% that said authentication password and 3% that say key escrow. So 59% is a pretty big number, but did we fall into that same trap that we had before, that we all chose one thing and it was really something else? Thankfully, in this case, we did not. That is the right answer, integrity verification. That's what that long string of hexadecimal values are on that website. This is a hash. This is a representation of that particular piece of data in a single fixed string of information. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as a message digest, or I tend to see this used more often, a fingerprint, which really does describe what a hash is. Sort of like the fingerprints that you would take for any particular purpose. Law enforcement reasons, you're getting a new job, they're doing a background check. I've had to use fingerprints to get certain types of licenses. That is one where they don't need all of me. They don't need my picture. They don't need to take a measurement of every part of my body. All they need is the fingerprint. And they just take that fingerprint. And obviously, everybody's fingerprint is about the same size. It's a same size piece of data that they are storing, but it's a unique representation of me. So if you run across that fingerprint somewhere else, it probably was me. It most likely was me. In the case of cryptography, it absolutely was me, because it's a cryptographic representation. But it's a one-way trip. Obviously, if you have a picture of my fingerprint, you don't know what I look like. You don't know how tall I am. You don't know what color my hair is. You don't know anything about me. All you know is that I have a fingerprint, and if you happen to find the other fingerprint on a human, you'll know that that is really me. That's where that fingerprint came from. But you can't undo it. You can't create me just from my fingerprint. And that's another important thing to consider about a hash. A hash is not the data. A hash is a fingerprint of the data. Very different in how they are used. But they are very useful for verifying information. They provide integrity, just like my fingerprint provides integrity. If I put my fingerprint on something, you know that it came from me because you can verify that fingerprint, that it really is my fingerprint. Same thing with that long hex string next to the file that was downloaded. We can use that for integrity. So we can download the file and then run the same hashing algorithm on our local computer against the file that we downloaded. And if that file on our local computer and the hash created from that file matches the hash that's on that website, then we can feel that, aha, we have downloaded the file and it is an exact duplicate of the file that exists on that website because the hashes are exactly the same. If there was one bit, a 1 or a 0 that had been changed within that file, the hash would have been completely different. They would not have verified, and you would have known, I downloaded this file, but the file I downloaded not the same one that that hash was created from on the website. There is a disparity. There's a problem somewhere. Let's figure out where the problem is. So integrity is a huge use of hashing. That is exactly what that long string of hexadecimal numbers are. This is a very common process on this exam, by the way, is they ask you about a technology, but they don't tell you what the technology is. They might give you the abbreviation or the acronym of that technology, but they don't tell you what it is, but they expect you to know that so that you can answer the question. This is a good example of that. Knowing that this long string of hexadecimal characters next to a download link is a hash allows you now to answer the question of what this is. So you would have to know hashing is used for integrity verification. This would not be used for these other options. For example, that's not a decryption key. Why would you encrypt something and then make the key available to everybody? Relatively useless process. That's why we don't make our encryption keys available to everybody, because that effectively makes them worthless. So we certainly would not put them on a website next to the download link. Doesn't make any sense. So that's why it would not be decryption key. File metadata. File metadata is information about the file. When was the file created? Who created the file? When did they store it? When did they last update it? When did they originally create it? When was it updated? And when was it posted? These are all metadata. This is information you can find from many different documents. If you look at a document on your computer, a spreadsheet, a document you've stored on your file system keeps a lot of metadata about a file. Then it knows where that file was stored. It knows who stored it. It knows the permissions for that file. That's all metadata. It's something you can work with. But it has nothing to do with the long string of hexadecimal characters or the hash that's located on that website. We had 4% that said authentication password, same scenario as a decryption key. Putting a password on a website next to a download link is effectively the same as not password protecting the document at all. Why would you give away the password on the same screen next to the file that you're downloading? That's not very useful, and it's probably not what you would do with that in that case either. And then lastly, key escrow. Key escrow is when you would have a third party hold on to your decryption keys so that perhaps you can't decrypt, someone else in your organization can't decrypt, but if you all get together, you can effectively all turn the keys at the same time to launch the missile and then finally decrypt the data. So sometimes having a third party maybe keep part of a key, another person keep another part of a key, another person keep another part of the key, and then everybody has to come together to be able to use that key. Very common way to maintain security and privacy in very secure environments. In this case, however, that big long string of hex characters is a hash because it's next to a download link. That's what we would use to be able to understand if the file that we downloaded has maintained its integrity. And that was the answer we were looking for, is to be able to know the integrity and ensure that the file that we have is exactly the same as the file that is on that website. The 59% of you that answered that one as integrity verification got the answer absolutely correct. I know that we are at the top. We're past the top of the hour. We're in overtime here, but I do have one more question for you. This next question, I thought I would give you a question from my practice exams book. If you've not seen my practice exams book before, I wrote this book because I went out to the internet to see what type of practice questions were out there, and I was very unimpressed, to say the least. I was not really in a place where practice exam questions I felt were very good. So I started writing my own practice exam questions. And when I started going through and writing them, I found that I could let's create entire sets of practice exams with performance-based questions, multiple choice-based questions. And that's what this book is 381 pages of pure practice exams questions that are written in the same style, the same form, the same structure as actual exam questions. So see if this is a good example of something that you might see on the exam. I have a practice exam question that we're going to go through. Let's do one right now. And then I'm going to give you, stay tuned for the continuing education numbers or keywords right after this. The question I have for you, it's from page 23 of the Practice Exams book, Practice Exam A. There's an Exam A, a B, and a C in this book. The question asks, a company encourages users to encrypt all of their confidential materials on a central server. The organization would like to enable key escrow as a backup option. See how well you were listening. Which of these keys should the organization place into escrow? Is it private, CA, session, or public? This would be a good one to go through to figure out. Not a repeated question. This is a question that you probably are familiar with because we were just talking about when you would use this type of technology. See if this is something you are familiar with. As always, of course, same rules apply. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. And you want to be able to answer what you think this one is, or in your mind, think about what you would choose for this particular question. Again, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. One thing about this is that it's a PDF, which really helps a lot. You can annotate. So if you're doing this on a document where you are writing, you have a stylus, you can write on the screen. I have a mouse, so I can go to different parts of the screen and highlight or change them. I can select different things that are on here that I might want to reference. We could figure out what this happens to be as we were looking through them. The answer to this one, though, is on a different page. We're on page 23. If we just want to know if it's A, B, C, or D, we can go to page 33. But I want details. I want to know more about this one, which is on page 106. Now, obviously, since we're on page 23, if you've ever worked with PDFs before, you would have to scroll just to get there, which is very annoying. So one of the things I did in my practice exams book is I made these hot links. So you can see next to the details, it turns into the little hand with the finger, and I click on the details, click, it goes all the way to page 106. Just jumps all the way over there. So this gives me the question again, and it tells me the answer is A, private. And of course, I give you an explanation of why the right answer is right. So far, not incredibly unusual, although the question itself is written in the same style as actual exam questions. It's very common to see the right answer. Sometimes online, you'll see an explanation of some kind that explain why it is the right answer. But one of the things that always frustrates me when I look at online practice exams is I'll get the answer wrong, but it won't tell me why I got the answer wrong. And I think we're really missing an opportunity in that scenario to help people learn why the wrong answer was wrong and why the right answer was right. So in my book, every single incorrect answer is documented. We know exactly why it was not CA. We know why it was not the session key. We know why it was not the public key. And I explain why. In fact, I will tell you that if you are working with this and you get it right, please read through the wrong answers just to be sure that your thought process was correct. And of course, the question on your exam may not be about private keys. The question on your exam might be about session keys. Well, it would be good if you had some type of information about what session keys are used for. In fact, it tells you session keys are commonly used to temporarily provide confidentiality during a single session. Once the session is complete, the keys are discarded. Session keys are not used to provide long-term data encryption. So this is a really good example of how this would be. Now, if you read through the question and you understood none of the technology, that happens to me too, I have for you a link back to the video that we used to originally create the question. So you can go to that particular link on my website for public key infrastructure, and you could watch the video and then come back to the question. Since this is a PDF, some of you may not even realize I'm using this on a Mac, but it works the same way on Linux. It works the same way on Windows. It works the same way on your mobile devices. Many PDF readers have a back button. I'm going to click the back button here at the upper left. Click, and now we're back to where we started. On question A68, I can go to question A69 next, and we can go through the other questions that are in this book. That is my practice exams book. Hopefully that's something you might want to consider once you watch the videos, you read a good textbook, you've gone through some labs and hands-on, and now you're ready to really test yourself. This can give you a pretty good idea if you're ready to take this exam. Another great way to learn. If you want to learn more about this, go to professormesser.com/securitype. Now, why is this not an app? People are asking on the chat. Well, because if I made it into an app, it would be forced into a particular device or a particular operating system or particular platform. PDF can be read by anybody. So I wanted to make something as accessible as possible to the most number of people as possible. And in this case, this is a perfect way to make that happen. Don't worry, when you take the exam, it'll all be online. It'll all be automatically graded for you, but we're not worried about that right now. I'm not worried about trying to emulate the exam experience. Everybody's been through exams. I'm trying to get the information into your hands, and I think this is a great way to do it. These practice exams are available not just in the digital format, but the physical format as well. You can order these. We ship anywhere in the world for any of our study materials, and you'll be given information on pricing for shipping during the checkout process. Find out more at professormesser.com/securitype. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to give you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That continuing education unit credit can only be received if you follow these instructions. Those instructions are: go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. On that link, click Contact Us. In the Contact Us page, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put February 2025 Security Plus so that I know where this came from. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month: private CA session. Private CA session. Those are the ones we want to work with. So those are your super secret code words of the month. And once you do that, send that message to me. Click the submit button. It will send me a message on my side. It takes me about a week to turn these around, and eventually they get back to you. You will get something returned to you. Sometimes it gets pretty quick. Sometimes it takes about a week. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But I'm doing pretty well these days, keeping up with this. Again, the process is go to the top or the bottom of professormesser.com. Click the Contact Us link. In that form that comes up, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put February 2025 Security Plus or something close to it. Don't worry. I won't ding you if it's not letter perfect. You'll be okay. In fact, many people sort of get there. As long as I can make out what it is, we're good. Most of the time I can. We don't have a problem. And in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month: private CA session. And then if you want to put anything else in there, I read through every single one of these. I like hearing where you are with your certification studies, why you're looking to get this continuing education unit credit. It's great to hear from you. Unfortunately, I get so many of these, I'm not able to respond back individually, but just to let you know that I do read through every single one that you send. These are for your continuing education unit credit. Obviously, if you're not certified yet, none of that matters to you. These are only good if you are already certified and you have that certification. Those are my practice exams. So thank you so much. That's another great way to support the things that we do here. And just like our course notes, if you get the physical edition, you get the digital, you can download immediately at no additional cost. Of course, that's useful, but many times throughout this session today, I have mentioned how important it is for you to have the official exam objectives. They are incredibly valuable, and they're free. That's a great price. I love free. They're available to download directly from the CompTIA website, which is the only place you should be downloading them from to make sure that you get the latest version of these exam objectives. They provide you with a bulleted, individual, detailed, very specific breakdown of everything you need to know on this exam. Here's a copy of the exam objectives on my screen. It gives you an overview of the exam itself, the percentages that you would expect to see on the exam, and then they break down for you bullet by bullet everything you need to know. They are so specific with this that I tell everyone, and this is absolutely the case, that if you know every single one of these bullets, you will pass your exam. That's how close they stay to this list. This is an incredibly important list. And if it's not in this list, do not worry about learning that for your exam. Obviously, there are things that you will need to know in your career that are not in this list. This is not a comprehensive list for the rest of your life. It's just for this exam. So please feel free to download that. It's incredibly useful. I use this to make my course. That's how detailed I feel this is. And that's why you'll notice that the courses, the video numbers, the format, the structure, it all follows exactly along with the exam objectives. That way you're able to find exactly what you're looking for. They're on the CompTIA website. You can either go to professormesser.com/objectives, and I have a link that will take you over there, or you can simply go to your favorite search engine and type CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you to the first link, will be that objective download link. Very, very, very useful. If you don't have these objectives, you're already at a disadvantage. It's an easy download and a very valuable document. Make sure you grab it. It should be the first thing you look through. It should be the last thing you reference before booking your exam. It's a great checklist to know if you're ready to go. People often ask me, how do I know if I'm ready? You take this list and you start checking things off. And if you check everything off, you're in good shape. It's exactly where you need to be. So make sure you have a look at that. We do one of these study groups every month. The next one is planned for March the 26th. I say planned because sometimes these do change. So I very much encourage you to always check back at professormesser.com/calendar so that you will know when the next live event is going to be. This is something that I change immediately if it ever changes. So if you look at that right now, you're getting the latest update of when that is going to be. Of course, we have other study groups we do. We have A+ study groups on the 11th and 13th, the Network Plus study group on the 19th, and our Security Plus for the 26th, but those can change. Sometimes that's what happens. Don't worry, we've got more to come, though. Don't go anywhere. We've got the after show is coming up where I'll answer your questions. You've been answering my questions for the last hour. It's only fair that I answer yours as well. You can submit those at any time with that same link that we've been doing. There it is, professormesser.com/QA. Of course, don't forget about the weekly Security Plus pop quiz question that you can find on professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/X, professormesser.com/Instagram. And of course, our entire video course is available on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. I'll also tell you that if you are here and you enjoyed this study group, we would love it if you could give this video a thumbs up. We always know that you hear this from every YouTube content creator that's out there, but the reason you hear it from all of us is because YouTube really, really looks at those numbers, and it really helps us a lot. And if you ever want to support us and you don't even have to spend any money, that's a great way to do it. Just hit that thumbs up button, or even better, subscribe to our channel. We're already over 1 million subscribers to our YouTube channel. So please join the 1 million+ folks who are already there. We'd love to have you come aboard. It's a great place to be. There's plenty more that we're going to be creating on that YouTube channel all the time. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers if you're in the US, Canada, or US territory at professormesser.com/vouchers. And our course notes are available on our website. Use the main menus on our website or go to professormesser.com/701SB for our success bundle, which you can buy either the entire success bundle or individual pieces there. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. Stick around for the after show coming up in just a few seconds. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Okay. Oh, okay. That helps quite a bit. Let me clean up my screen a little bit. Let me bring this over and let me click that button. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the after show. Thanks for joining us in that first hour. We always have so much fun with the new questions. I never know what questions are going to be gimmies. I never know what questions are going to be the hard ones. It's always a surprise to me. So if I can get through a study group and we were challenged and we learned something, I think we did pretty good. Oh, before I get into this, I have to step away for about 15 seconds because my automatic air monitoring system that cools things down in here is not working. So I have to do it the old-fashioned way. I have to get up and go do this. So let me go over here. One moment, please. Let's make this a little cooler. Cold. What mode are we in? Oh, so much better. Okay. Thankfully, it's a little cool outside. So not so horrible in here today. This next section of the study group is sort of what I'd like to call our after show, but really it's not after anything. We're just continuing on with determining what questions we have and how we can answer them for you. But instead of me asking you the questions in this after show, you ask me the questions. So I'm going to bring up a screen right now that will allow you to see that. In fact, if you go back to that same link, not that link, that link that we've been using, professormesser.com/QA, you can also see that you can submit your questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. And they go into a queue that's over here. So you won't see them pop up on the screen right away. I get to read through them first. Trust me, you want me to do that. And then that way, you will absolutely be able to see what questions have been submitted. All I have to do is sit here and go through those questions. So I'm going to click on my side and see what a lot of questions waiting to be reviewed. Folks are amazing. You've just sent so much into this list that, and a lot of, we usually get some very interesting questions in this after show. In fact, this first one's kind of an interesting one because it's not one I often get. So let's talk about the exam. This is a question from Matt, who asks, what is the most common problem you've seen people running into that makes the test difficult for them? Wow, there's a big list. I should probably write this one out. This is an entire article I could post on my website of the most common. In fact, Lori, who's watching this replay, please send me a note that I need to write a big article of just all the big ones. Because I've got a list in my head. I'm just adding them up right now of all of the most common problems. Because there's problems that seem to happen at different areas of study. The first one is that people sometimes use the wrong study materials. For example, right now, the version of the exam is SY0-701. That's the current version of the Security Plus exam. And I tell people all the time, make sure all of your books, all of your videos, all of your labs, every study material that you have has those numbers on it. SY0-701. If that says SY0 anything else, 601, 501, 401, it says anything else on that list, you have the wrong exam objectives. Why is that bad? It's bad because CompTIA tends to do enough updates every 3 years or so, they update this exam. So every 3 years, this update can have sometimes a little bit of changes, sometimes a lot of changes. For example, I think this is a good place to go to. I'm going to go to the Professor Messer website. I'm familiar with this site. I'm going to go to the Security Plus link on my site where it says Start Here. And I tend to put everything here so you can find everything on one page. Here's the videos. Here's the study group link. Here's the Discord chat. Here's the link to the weekly pop quiz. Just everything's here. You need course notes. You need the success bundle. They're all here. And at the very bottom, I have some frequently asked questions like, when is the latest Security Plus exam? When does it retire? How long does it take to study? Can we use study materials from a previous Security Plus exam version? And so I try to explain to people, no, you don't want to do that. So that's one thing that I often see people do is they will use the wrong materials. They'll study for the 601. They'll go in and take the 701 exam, and they won't do very well. The other thing that people tend to miss on is they don't get the exam objectives. If you were ever looking for the best, most comprehensive list of everything you need to know, it's those objectives. And it's still remarkable to me how many people don't get them. One of the things that I will see, people will come into our Discord chat. They go, I took my Security Plus exam. I didn't do very well. They kept asking me questions about hashing, about data masking. They'll just bring up a topic from the exam objectives. And we go, well, yeah, data masking. Do you recall seeing that in your exam objectives? And they'll say, exam objectives? What are exam objectives? They didn't even know they existed. That's a huge thing that unfortunately gets missed quite a bit. I often see people also study things that aren't on the objectives. They'll show up with a set of practice questions that they got from somewhere on the internet that are asking questions of topics that aren't even listed in the exam objectives. Completely off scope. They're never going to show up on the exam. They're not even in the set of exam objectives. They're probably from a previous exam version and not updated on the internet. And they'll ask questions about, hey, tell me about this thing. We're thinking, well, that's from an exam from 10 years ago. We don't deal with that anymore. It's a technology we don't use anymore. It's not on the current exam. And so make sure that you are not getting these tools and materials that go off scope. It's so important. There's also other things that people tend to run into with the exam process itself. Some people prefer going and taking their exam at a testing center where you drive to the center, bus to the center, walk to the center. Somebody else has the testing center. You walk into the testing center, you give them ID, they take you to a room, you take the exam. That's how we've traditionally done it. But in the last number of years, online testing has become all the rage. But online testing has its own set of idiosyncrasies, let us say, a set of rules. They are very strict with how your room is set up. They're very strict with what you can have on the desk. They're very strict with what you can do during the exam. And if you go outside of what they expect, they will stop the exam right there. And whatever score you're at is the score you get. So if you just started your exam and you drop something and you go out of the scope of your picture, they will stop the exam. They'll go, your exam's over. You went outside the camera. Only took one question. Yeah, you just failed. All the money you spent on that exam is now gone. So you want to be very clear of what is expected of you. What are the rules when you go into an exam center? What are the rules when you go to take the exam in your home? Because very different rules. Very, very different. So absolutely know this. And there's a number of other things about content itself that I think people get worried about and wrapped up around. And quite honestly, if you stick to the objectives, you'll know exactly what is important on this exam, and you won't be worried that you're studying the wrong thing for the wrong exam. The current version of the exam is the 701, the SY0-701. So the playlist on my YouTube channel for SY0-701, those are the right videos. And you'll notice every video I post has the exam number in the title of the video. So if you're ever watching a video that I've done and you're wondering, is this for the right exam? I'm not sure. Well, you'll see it in the title of the video. It will say SY0-701. Yep, that's for this latest exam. Okay, that's the one that we will use to make that happen. So that is important to consider. Those are just a few of the problems I see people running into that makes the test overly difficult, unnecessarily difficult. So make sure that you consider those. And I probably have 6 or 7 in the back of my mind now. I just need to document them, write them down, put them in an article so you can access those on the Professor Messer website. There might be a good thing to read through before you plan to take your exam. Let's keep going through this list. Others that are here. Some of these questions I have answered already, especially answered the one about your exam objectives. Some of you have even asked, how do I know if I'm ready for this exam? You've got your exam objectives. So that's the way to do it. That's the way to make all of that happen. So make sure you're familiar. Let's keep going through the list. A lot of people have even submitted questions already that said, I was taking a practice exam and it was asking me questions that had nothing to do with the current exam objectives. I see this all the time. They'll ask questions from the 601 exam, except the 701 exam, half of the 701 exam is all new content. 50% of the 701 exam doesn't appear on the 601 exam. So that's a big change. They really revamped with the 701. That's why I tell people all the time how important it is that you always study from materials that match the version of the exam you're planning to take. And for Security Plus, make sure all of your study materials say 701. You're going to be in trouble if you walk into that exam and you studied from something else. You'll be super surprised of the questions that you get or the questions you don't get. Very, very important to keep those in mind. Here is an age-old question that I love to answer because it's, well, sort of an easy question, but it's a popular question from Jacques, who asks, are the PBQs worth more points than the multiple choice questions? So Let's take a poll. I wish I could do an easy poll. Can I do a poll on the YouTube? There should be a way that if I wanted to create a poll, a live poll, there was supposed to be a way in YouTube that I could create a live poll to do this. Nope, not an easy way anyway to do a live poll. But I want to know, for those of you that have looked at the exam objectives, and here we go, start a poll. The question is, here we go. Do you think the PBQs are worth more or less than multiple choice questions? PBQs are worth more. PBQs are worth less. Start the poll on YouTube. If you're on the YouTube chat and you're here live, you can answer this question as to what the PBQs were referring to performance-based questions. Are they worth more or are they worth less than the actual exam questions? I want to know what you think, because I know what I think. And in fact, I know what the answer is. Ooh, I know the definitive answer to this question, and it probably won't surprise you. Maybe it will surprise you. Maybe, and I will say, the actual answer I didn't give you. You can't answer it. It's sort of a trick question. So we've had a number of people that have submitted their answer into this list. We'll give it a second or there should be 3 or 4 or 5 more choices in here, but we did this on the fly, people. This is how I roll in the after show. This is the level of preparation that I give you in the after show, which is donuts. Sorry about that. Let's end the poll and see how you did. And the poll says 129 people that voted in this case, 79% say the PBQs are worth more, about 80%, 20% worth less. Rounding errors, we'll say 80-20, which is probably, I think, pretty close to what people have talked about and told me, what they think. They've said, yeah, we're pretty sure the performance-based questions must be worth more than the multiple choice, right? Here is the actual answer. Are you ready? Nobody knows. CompTIA doesn't tell us. They will never tell us. It is perfectly reasonable that performance-based questions could be worth more than multiple choice questions. It's also perfectly reasonable that multiple choice questions are worth more than performance-based questions, because we don't know. We have no idea. You would think, well, these are different and you only get a handful, so they must be worth more. Also, the 5 performance-based questions you get at the beginning of the exam are worth more than 5 of the multiple choice questions. I don't know that that's true. In fact, I don't know that that's accurate. And I would argue that there may be exams that you've taken, because everybody's exam is a little different. I would think, from what I have seen, that performance-based questions are worth a lot less than most people think. And I say that because we've had people that have come to our study groups. There's people that I've communicated with over email, people that I've talked about who've taken the exam, and they've gone through the entire exam. They skipped over the performance-based questions at the beginning. They went through all the multiple choice questions, and when they were finished all of those and they circled back to start going back through the performance-based questions to answer them, they ran out of time. They literally did not answer anything with performance-based questions, and they still passed. So I know that technically doesn't answer our question, but it certainly leads people away from the idea that, oh, I see this all the time. If people take the exam and they don't pass, they often come back to me and say, I didn't pass. I must have really done poorly on the performance-based questions. I said, well, actually, from what we've heard, you could have passed without even answering any of them in some cases. We don't know if that's true for every exam because it's always random and working through those. So one of the things I tell people about performance-based questions. Are they worth more than multiple choice? Are they not worth more than multiple choice? Here's the problem with the answer is there's no way to verify it. There's no way to know if it's true or not true. And even if you take the exam and you get your final score, there's nothing on that final score sheet that tells you anything about what answers were right, what answers were wrong, and how many points you got for each question. They simply don't tell you. And this is why I think I mentioned this earlier in the study group. Here's my official answer when people say, are the performance-based questions worth more points than the multiple choice questions? I say, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Because if you get them right, you'll get some points. If you get them wrong, you won't get any points. We don't know how many points those are. We'll never know how many points those are. My objective, my goal for you is to get as many questions right as you can, regardless of what those questions are. And if you do that, you will pass this exam. That's it. There's no way to reverse engineer it. There's no way to figure it out. There's no way to hack into the exam and figure out what the exam, we don't know. We just don't know. And we'll never know. It's a mystery of the universe. The sun will go supernova and we will never know what the answer to that question is. There's somebody who's in a locked room somewhere who knows the answer to this question, and they're not talking. They're not telling us, and they never will. So it's an interesting question, to be fair. Jacques, super interesting question, super popular question. There's just no answer to it. There's no way to know the answer to any of those. So don't worry about it. Do not worry about it, because ultimately it doesn't matter. I tell people, if you want to believe that they're worth more, believe that. If you want to believe that they're worth less, believe that. Ultimately, nobody knows. We can't prove it either way. So there you go. In fact, one of the next follow-up questions I got from somebody completely different that we're not going to show on the screen was, so how are these performance-based questions scored? I don't know, Colton. We don't know. We have no idea, and we'll never know. So absolutely, don't worry about it. Don't focus on it. That's not your concern anyway, by the way. How they grade the exam is the least of your worries. You have an entire document of exam objectives. That's your thing you should worry about. Go to that piece of paper, focus on those topics. Focus on understanding that piece of information. And if you're really interested in figuring out the math that's involved, you should go to the section of the exam objectives that talk about how much it costs when you lose an asset and what those particular definitions are for those things. That's the math that you'll need to know for the exam. Let's do some more questions. Great. It's a great, interesting thing to think about, though, isn't it? I mean, if you want to go into the nuts and bolts of it and figure out the inside baseball piece, there is an interesting part of that. I agree with you. We just don't know the answers, and we never will. Next on our list, let's keep going to that piece. Let's go. Okay, here we go. Let's say that you're already certified. Like Anthony. Anthony says, recently passed the Network Plus exam, also have the Security Plus. What other options are available, aside from 10 hours of the CEUs from live seminars, to stay ahead of my CEU requirements for certification renewal down the line? This is another popular question, because and the problem with this question is that there are a lot of answers to this. I guess that's a good part and a bad part. If you need to renew your certification, it's good that you've got options, but there's a lot of things to know about these options. One of the things I'll mention to you before we get into the details of this is in the YouTube video description of this video, there is a link to a video I made a couple of years ago at this point, but is still completely accurate, which describes how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certification in just a few hours. That's the title of the video. Not only do I explain how to do that in just a few hours, I really do step through all of the major ways to renew your certification and what the advantages and disadvantages are of each of those methods. So you could take a higher level CompTIA exam. You could take a third-party certification exam. You could collect CEUs. You could take the CertMaster CE online training. So those are the 4 major ways to work towards renewing your certification. And in that video, I describe advantages and disadvantages of all of those. Ultimately, I think most people who have the A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus will probably opt to either take a higher level certification because they were doing that anyway. But if they're not, they would probably decide to do the CertMaster CE because it can be done very, very quickly. And it's only slightly more expensive than collecting continuing education units, collecting the number of points that you need to renew. So that's really what that is. You're kind of collecting knowledge points. And when you get to a certain number of knowledge points, your certification is renewed. For Security Plus, and the reason that this is mentioned, I think on Security Plus, it's what, 50? You need 50 CEUs to renew your certification. That's a lot of CEUs. It's a lot of stuff to know for the Security Plus. It's a different number if you're renewing Network Plus. It's a different number than if you're renewing A+. And of course, for CompTIA, you just renew the highest level cert and everything else underneath is automatically renewed. There is a chart that defines that on the CompTIA website. I'm kind of speaking very broadly, but there are some places where that's not the case. So make sure you check that out on the CompTIA website. This renewal process is a 3-year process. So the moment you get certified, you are certified for 3 years. If you renew that certification anywhere in that time frame, 3 years is tacked on to the end. Or it's tacked on to the day you renewed, depending on the method you use to renew with. Again, complicated, isn't it? There's all these nuances and, well, if you do it this way, it's done like this. If you do it this other way, it's done differently. It is sometimes a challenge. I would recommend going through and really understanding what the differences are in all of these renewal methods. You should learn all of the ins and outs of all of these so that you can make an educated decision about what the best way to renew might be. So make sure you have a look at that. It's very important you understand what the right way is for you, what the wrong way might be for you, what part fits the best. Maybe I don't want to spend money to renew. I can do it this way. Maybe I do want to spend money to renew. I can do it a different way. So there's different ways you can go about making this work for yourself, for your budget, for everything that you're doing. It's a great way to focus on it. Make sure you understand the process. Check out the video I did. Read through the details on the CompTIA website. There's a huge section on certification renewal and continuing education. Make sure you are familiar with it. All right, let's keep going through this list. I'm very parched today. I apologize for the constant stopping and going here. For those of you wondering, we talked a lot about some of our additional training products today. We talked about practice exams. We talked about course notes. We talked about getting the physical versions on the website. And the physical versions always include the performance-based or the digital version. So if you were looking at performance-based and multiple choice questions in the practice exams book, you can get those same questions in the digital form of the PDF. So those just come with it automatically. If you have the PDF and you're thinking, I should have got the physical version, let me know. Just open a ticket from your member login at professormesser.com/members. You can open a ticket and say, I want to upgrade to the physical version, and you'll only pay the difference in price between the digital and the physical. So I take into account your previous purchase. So that's a nice discount if you're planning to upgrade to the physical edition. I'm more than happy to do that for you. Other questions that have come in. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to come through that. Is there a subscription? No subscriptions. I don't do subscriptions for any of my training materials. It just doesn't seem to make sense for what we do. You're studying for an exam. That's the exam you're studying for that version. A subscription doesn't make any sense. So no, you just get the book. It's yours. The The member login is not a membership. That's when somebody purchases something that allows them to download the digital edition. That's just your private login. That's your inside login. We could call you insiders. We could call you students. We could call you super cool people login. We could call it, anything. We call it member login for something like that. That's what that name comes from. Let's keep going through this list. Boy, some great questions here. If you'd like to add a question to the list, go to professormesser.com/QA, whatever that stands for. We'll figure it out. Okay, let's talk outside the scope of the certification. Let's talk real world from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, as someone who recently earned A+ and Network Plus certifications, but lacks formal experience or internships, how can I showcase tangible, real-world skills to hiring managers when a full-fledged home lab setup is currently out of my budget? You're on the right track. So Anonymous is absolutely right that in today's very competitive world for these positions, especially in technology, we've worked to get our certifications, but you have no practical experience. You haven't had a technology job before. And you may think that a home lab is outside your budget. There's actually great ways to set up a home lab with exactly $0. So let's talk a little bit about this. The first one is there are things you can do to position yourself in the competitive interviewing environment, even though all you may have are industry certifications. I often say you really need 4 things, 4 elements to have your best chance at getting that job. The first is a formal education. So some type of 4-year degree, 2-year degree, any type of degree, any type of formal education, that's useful and important. And employers like to see that. Secondly, are industry certifications, your A+, your Network Plus, your Security Plus, et al. You've got lots to choose from there. And hopefully you have one that the employer is looking for. That becomes important. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The third is that you have some type of practical experience. Notice I didn't say professional experience, which implies that you were paid for performing this service. But there may be times when you are not being paid to perform that service. You might be volunteering. You might have provided technical services for an organization at no charge. That does happen. And you might have set up a home lab. We'll come back to the home lab in just a second, but that's some practical experience, and we'll explain how in just a moment. And lastly, and this fourth element is probably the one that is most overlooked. The fourth element is you know someone who works there already. And this can be someone who works in a different department. They don't have to work in the IT department, but they might work in accounting, shipping and receiving, marketing, wherever. They just work for the organization. Knowing someone who works there, having a connection, just a professional acquaintance, someone you met from a trade show, someone who's a neighbor of yours, someone who's from your church, someone who's in a civic organization you're a part of. Those people are just as important as those other things we just mentioned, sometimes even more so. Let's go back to that third element, which is practical experience. One of the things that Anonymous said here is, I don't have money to set up a lab. It's outside my budget. But these days, everything's virtual. You don't need a physical lab. You don't need a rack with stuff plugged into your power source and fans running and your family angry at you because it makes heat and noise. Who wants that anyway? Instead, these days, most of our home labs are virtualized. We're running a VM environment on our desktop. We just put in a lot of memory in our computer or have enough memory in our computer to just run one virtual machine, which I would say 90% of us have a system that has enough memory to be able to run a VM. And if you're not sure, try running one. You might be surprised how much you're able to do with one virtualized environment that you're not able to do otherwise. So it's pretty interesting what you're able to do with this. Now, the reason I mention this, I have a video a different video that is in the YouTube video description of this video. We're doing a lot of self-promotion today, and I can only say thank you. I'm not going to apologize, but I will say thank you. In the YouTube video description of this video is how to get a job in IT with no experience. I made the video because it's a popular question that we get, is how do you get these jobs and you have no way to know what you're doing yet because you're not in the industry? It's that awful catch-22 where they want you to have experience, but how are you going to experience if you have to have experience to get the job in the first place? Well, one of the things I mention in that video is how you can set up a home lab, and I give you some ideas. So if you're working on your A+ certification, you should be setting up a Windows Server environment with Active Directory. You should be building out your own Active Directory infrastructure. You should be connecting your system to the Active Directory server. You should be pushing down your own policies. You should be configuring logins to the domain. You should be testing those logins. All of that can be done for free. No money involved. Similarly, you can do a similar thing in the network world. If you wanted to get more networking knowledge, most people will look over at Cisco. They have a fantastic emulated environment where you can set up an entire corporate infrastructure of routers, switches, printers, workstations, laptops, and other devices, connect them all together, configure the switching, configure the routing, and set it up on your screen in this virtualized world. It's a product called Packet Tracer, and it's free. For super free. I love free. All they really want from you is for you to register. You have to have a username and password to be able to use it. So they require you to register on Cisco's website. But the software itself costs no money to use. You can build out some amazing infrastructures in a minute. Click, 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 click. Put lines in between. We'll connect them all with Ethernet. We'll connect up a cloud configuration. We'll put workstations on the other side. We'll ping between. Is our routing working? Is our switching working? You can do it all from Packet Tracer. Very useful to have there. Makes for a free way to do labs. Now, it's a little bit overkill for Network Plus. It's a little bit outside the scope. But if you want to get more knowledge about switching, about routing, and your overall career path is sort of leaning towards network administration, that's a great way to kickstart that process. And if you're studying for Security Plus, set up a firewall, set up an IPS, set up another type of security tool. Maybe set up a SIM and have all the log files from all of these devices you're setting up, send log files down to the SIM. I've now given you weekends and weekends worth of things to do just by mentioning that. So that's something that can be very, very useful. But here's how you use it. It's one thing to set up the lab. Well, I set up the firewall and I plugged in my internet connection, and now my entire house is going through this virtualized firewall, or maybe you even bought a real firewall and you're sending traffic through the firewall, and it's making all these log files. There's some good stuff in there. So this is the thing you will have. You're in this security interview. They're wondering if how knowledgeable you are with these technology. You can say, well, I just configured about a month ago. I configured my very first next generation firewall. I set it up on my system. Here's how I set it up. And then I plugged it into my internet connection. And you will not believe the things I started blocking that were simply trying to come through my internet connection that I never knew were there before. But I turned on logging and I started tracking how many hack attempts have been made against my IP address from my ISP that are just people randomly trying to find something to hack. You'll find something in a minute, less than a minute. You'll have information instantly. People will automatically find you and start trying to hack you. But if you have a report of that, and you can show, here's a graph that in 24 hours, how many people were hitting my firewall and trying to hack my systems. In fact, you could even do it close to the pin. How many people do you think that was, Mr. Person who's interviewing me? You say 50, 100, 200. Here's the number. And then you could talk about it. 7,000 people in the last 24 hours tried to attack, or whatever the number is. And it's an interesting conversation. You are now changing this from somebody who's just trying to get through a list of questions to now having a conversation about security because you set up a lab with actual information. Your whole goal when setting up these labs is to come up with stories. You want stories. So make sure you are building out something that you are collecting information on. Also, here's another thing that will help you with the story is that when you are building this out, you're going to run into a problem. You're going to run into something that doesn't work. You're getting an error message. It's not working as you expected. Something has gone wrong. What do? You go to Google. You ask Google, why am I seeing this error message? And here it is, copy paste. And then you find the page finally that says, oh, that problem is because here's what you did or didn't do, and here's what you need to change. And then you go change it, and it worked. Don't just pass over that as if, well, it's fixed, so let's go to the next thing. You want to stop and document that because that's a story. Specifically, it's the story that answers the question that you always get in these interviews. Tell me about a time when you ran into an issue that you had to resolve and then you resolved it. What was that like? Tell us about that situation. Oh, I just had this when I set up my home lab that had this set up with it, and here's what it did. Here's the error message I got. And that was an interesting error message because I thought we did this thing. But then I did some research and found this person who ran into the same problem, and indeed they were correct. It was related to this thing, which I updated, and it solved the problem, and here's where we are. That is the story they want. They don't want kind of this broad thing. Well, we had an issue and then we shook it a little bit and then we restarted and everything was fine. To be fair, restarting usually fixes everything, but not always. So I think that's one where you talking about the process, you talking about, they really aren't interested in the specific problem as much as understanding what did you do to fix the problem. That's what they want to know. What is your thought process like? What's going on inside that brain of yours? What are the steps you went through to resolve that issue? Now, the issue itself may indeed be interesting. It's worth talking about. You can have a conversation about that. That simply adds embellishment to the story. That adds more context to the overall answer that they are looking for. But that also means that you're the one talking. And I will tell you, this is something that I think a lot of people don't consider, is that in these cases where you finally made it to an interview, you should be the one talking and setting the direction for the conversation. You are the one in charge. You probably don't think that's the case. You probably think the person who brought you in and sat you down and asked the first question is the person in charge. Oh, no. No. In fact, if you can have them not talk at all, that's your goal. Have them talk as little as possible. Here's the thing. They don't want to talk during this interview. They're really not interested in going through all these very boring and rote and trite questions that are on this sheet of paper. The thing they really don't want to do is be in that room with you, quite honestly. Here's how it usually works, by the way. For those of you who've never been in this situation, your interview is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 1:55, someone's boss walks into their cube because they were the one that was at their desk at that point. And the boss says, oh, hey, professor, I've got on my schedule at 2 o'clock that's coming in for that position we have for the Security Operations Center. I got to go to this really important meeting about the thing. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I need you to do the interview. Thanks. Here's their resume. Bye. That's usually how it works. Wait, I didn't plan for this. What? Yeah, I checked your schedule. It's like you got 30 minutes open. Can you go talk to them? Thanks so much. Bye. Here's the resume. So the people that you sit down with may have never even seen your resume. Here's how it usually goes. Hey, thanks for coming in, Fred. We appreciate you coming in all the way from Alaska. You know, they don't know anything about you. They've never read your resume. That's the first time they're going through your bulleted resume is when they sat down with you. So not only, to be fair, this is not always the case. This is really only half the times I've had an interview. So that's really how it goes. And this is one where they don't know what to ask sometimes, or on the sheet of paper that was provided to them are the 10 questions. Tell me about a problem that you have run into that you solved and what you did to solve it. They don't even know what the right answer is. Most of the time, they're not even sure what they're really trying to pull out of you. Because most of the time, you're talking to other technical people who are not HR folks. They're not really interviewers. They've really not, some people have never done this before, and now they're stuck in a room with you. So if you can be the one to lead them along, to tell the stories, to set the direction, and more importantly, just have a conversation. Because the more comfortable the person interviewing is, the better your score is going to be. And so when the interview's over, you've left the building, the boss comes back to my office, they go, how'd it go? I go, this guy really had an interesting set of stories he told about this thing, and he set up a home lab, and they showed me a graph, 7,000 times his network's been attacked. He really knew how to handle that firewall. He created some nice reports. He did this thing. That's what you want to leave them with. That's the idea that you want to have in someone's head. Now, they might have, in some of these larger organizations, they might have a sheet of paper with a set of checkboxes or scores that they have to do. So there may be some component to that, but the better you leave them, the more in control you are of that interview, the more you talk, the more stories you have, trust me, the better off you're going to be in competition with everybody else who's coming in. So if you don't have 3 or 4 stories in your pocket, you should start writing them down right now. Anytime you run into a problem, you should document that. Make a screenshot, put it in your notes, put it in your to-do list, put it in whatever you use to keep track of things. If you don't have a set of notes, if you don't use a note-taking program, if you don't have a daily set organization, a way to manage that, you should make one of those. There's lots of choices out there, both free and commercial. If you're on Mac OS, you just use Notes. If you're in Windows, there's a lot of choices available. There's web-based options available, some that integrate with apps on your phone. There's lots of ways to do this. But make sure you have the stories. The stories make the difference in an interview. And instead of you trying to reverse engineer what the 10 most popular questions are and come up with the right answers, which I see a lot of people doing. There's a lot of YouTube videos where here are the top 10 questions you'll get for a job in IT. And then they go through these 10 questions, and you somehow have to figure out what your answer is going to be about these. The better idea is that you answer the questions you would like to answer. Sometimes not accepting a question at face value is better because it leads you into your stories a little better. And this is something kind of get accustomed to over the years. Most of the time, it's because a lot of the questions they ask are so broad and generic that you could almost apply any answer to them. So the 4 stories that you have, you will probably be able to use all 4 of your stories during that interview because they're going to ask you about a challenge that you had. Do you have any experience with this technology? Did you do something relating to this? Your stories should focus on those things or have an aspect of that you could answer with. The goal is for you to talk and to have a relationship with that person and to communicate with them. And it's not simple. It's not as easy as I make it sound. You may have to practice this a bit. You may only get used to it once you've gone to 1 or 2 or 3 interviews with people. But sometimes that's the way it works. We get better with practice. So if you could have somebody interview you, if you can have some of the questions on the internet, on the YouTube, take a question from somebody, they ask the question, you should answer the question. In fact, you just pause the video and answer the question as if you were talking to them. What would you say for that question? What story would you tell? How would you lead yourself into that story? And then how do you have a moral, a story at the end? What did we learn today should be the end of the story. So the story should have here's what we wanted to do, here's the problem we ran into, and here's what we learned. That's your story. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And all of those should work together. And at the end, if you say, and here's what we learned, that's it. So I think that's an important part. And if you have some notes, write down the notes. And you can even tell people, oh, I had a great thing happen last week. Wait, I wrote some notes down on this. Let's talk about this. It's a crazy thing that we did. Here's what I did. Just read from your notes. People are fine with that. They want an answer to the question. They want something that was well developed. They want the story. So give them the story. That's what you're trying to do. It is as much about what you know as who you know. It's also as much what you know and who you know as how you tell people what you know and who you know. So it's no good if you know these people and you know this information. If you can't tell people about it, you're not going to get that job. So it is about as much the communication process as it is the knowledge. Make sure you're familiar with that. I know we're at the top of the hour. I did a little bit of overtime in the last one. And so far, we're doing all right. I'll take another sip, but we'll talk about some of these. There's been some talk in the chat about A+. So let me tell you a little bit about A+. Angel asks, any projection for the A+ 1200 study materials? For those not familiar, we were talking earlier about how the Security Plus updates in a couple of years. The A+ updates next month. 25th of March, you will see a new A+ exam. That is not the exam you want to take. Do not take the A+ exam on March 25th when it's released. Primarily because it's a new exam with new exam objectives. You'll notice there are no books yet. There's no labs. There's nothing you can reference with any of this information in it. That's perfectly normal. That's the way this usually works. What usually happens when a new exam comes out is the final exam objectives are released, and then you start seeing the new materials get produced. And usually it takes about 3 months for everybody to get their new materials out to the market. Sometimes it takes longer with some types of study materials, but that's usually about right. So if you're planning to take the A+, you'll probably just want to take the version that's available now because it's going to be available until September 25th. You've got 6 months before that exam goes away. So why would you wait? That doesn't even make sense. And even if you did wait, you're not going to have anything to study from when it's released. You're still 3 months away from having any study materials or having a choice of materials available to you. We will, of course, have course notes and practice exams, new video courses. All that stuff will be published as we always do. But that is why I focus on that. Now, for Security Plus, the current Security Plus exam doesn't retire until 2027. So you're good. No problem there. But for A+, this is all happening right now. Remember that 2 years from now, when Security Plus is updating, same story will apply. You got to go through. There's a sort of break-in period. You got to wait for stuff to get published. So you never want to take the newest version of the exam the day it's released. That's crazy. And you certainly don't want to wait. Never, never, never wait to get certified. You know why? Because other people aren't waiting. And those are the people you're competing with. So if you'd like to compete for the same job, but not have a certification that they have, yes, please wait. Doesn't make sense, does it? Don't do that. Don't put yourself at a disadvantage. Take whatever exam's available now. That's the one you should study for. Go pass that exam, go earn the certification. And whether you take and pass the current version of the exam or whether you take a version of the exam that's due to come in the future, the certification that you earn is exactly the same. There's no difference. There's no newer certification and older certification. It's all the same certification. So if that's the case, why are you waiting? There's no benefit to waiting. There's only disadvantage. And that's why I tell people never, 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 never wait for a certification to be released. We aren't even, because you don't know. What if it doesn't get released? What if it takes even longer for publishers to get their products out? Then you're still sitting there waiting. In the meantime, everybody else has earned their cert. They've went and got the job. They beat you for the job because you didn't have the cert. And there you sit. All right. As you can tell, we are working that throat. We're getting very dry. So we're going to keep maybe one more question in here. Keep going through this list of different things. we do have a number of different things that people will work on. And when they plan to take the exam becomes important. And I've talked about this back and forth. There's advantages and disadvantages for both of these. But if you are planning to take your exam, this question from Juan asks, do you recommend taking the exam virtually or in person? I have it scheduled on the 17th of March. I'm from Costa Rica. Thanks for your videos. Okay, great. This is a very debated topic in the industry for a couple of reasons. I think it's relatively straightforward when it comes to making the decision, though. When you're planning to take your exam, you have two choices. Take your exam in a testing center or take your exam online at home. So those are the two. Testing center is a known quantity. You know where the testing center is. You know that they have availability because you have to schedule it with that testing center. You know the testing center is going to be up and running and their software is going to work properly because they do this all the time, multiple times a day, every day. You know that the room setup is going to be appropriate for doing this. It'll be quiet. There's certain rules in place. You know that they're ready to go. They have a process set up. They check your IDs. They lock away your valuables and your other materials. You take the exam. It's in a test. Everything is set up for you. And if you run into a problem, they can fix it right then. When you take the exam at home, it's a little bit different. And imagine if you're CompTIA or any one of these organizations that would like to allow people to take their exams at home. They set up these testing centers to be very secure. How do we set up your home to be very secure? Well, they have a number of rules that you have to follow. And these rules require you to have a room that's set up with only one monitor and no other monitors. You can't have anything extra on your desk. You can't have headphones on your head. You can't have things on the wall. It has to be a room that you can close off. Can't be in a bathroom. Things like that. They have a big set of rules you have to abide by to make that happen. And before the exam starts, they make you take pictures of the room and upload the pictures to them so that they can evaluate, is this room appropriate for you to be taking the test in? They're really checking to make sure that they can maintain the security and the integrity of the exam materials. Perfectly valid. But you have to know the rules. As I mentioned before, there's some rules that if you go out of your camera, you do this, you lean over, now they say that you violated the rules, we're canceling your exam. And you lose the money. You can't just update the exam. You've now lost whatever money you used to start that exam. The voucher money's gone. You have to get a new voucher. So that's not what you want. The other thing is that some things could happen in the middle of an exam. What if you're on an internet connection and your internet connection goes out every 15 minutes? Well, then they'll have to cancel the exam again. That's a problem. So if you're on a network that's not working well, that's good. Now, they will tell you, they'll often give you a warning. So they will work with you to resolve if the problem is not too bad. So if you're sitting here and you got your hand over your mouth while you're doing the exam, you'll see a message pop up, remove your hand from in front of your mouth. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's one of the rules. You knew that because you read the rules. You just forgot during the exam, you put your hand in front of your mouth. So they'll tell you, don't do that. Oh, sorry. Yep, got it. Sorry. Keep going. Now, if you do that again, they go, we already warned you once. This is your second one. You're done. We're finished. Yep, exam's over. Gone. Finished. So they're pretty strict about this. There are some people that will tell you, I tried to do this online. In the middle of that, a dog outside barked, or the person thought they heard something over the microphone because they are watching you and they are listening. They heard something and they decided to close my exam. And I really feel like that was a problem. I really didn't get a good exam experience because they canceled my exam for maybe no reason. Now, there are ways that you could submit a ticket and say, you go look at that video because I think somebody may have canceled my exam and I think that was not legitimate. There have been some people where they forgot to tell their roommate they were on an exam. They walked in the room and walked behind them and walked through as they were going through. We can't have people walking through the exam. So they canceled it. Nope, no exam for you. You lost that money. You're going to have to do it again. That's legitimate. You need to know the rules. Read the rules. It's so important that you know what those rules are. There are other people that will say, I've taken an online exam 20 times, taken 20 online exams. I've never had a problem. Oh, great. Good for them. But there are people that have had problems. So it's one thing to say it can be done successfully, but I don't want to minimize the people that ran into problems or ran into issues because they weren't completely sure about the rules or weren't aware of things going on around them. They didn't know that if the FedEx guy rang the doorbell and they got up to get the door, that their exam would be forfeited. But it's in the rules. You need to read those rules. So if you're planning to take the exam at home, I think it is a perfectly reasonable way to take these exams. And in some cases, you might be somewhere like Costa Rica where there are limited number of exam centers. You might not even have an exam center near you, or the nearest exam center might be an hour or two away. If that's the case, you absolutely should take your exam at home. Why wouldn't you? It makes perfect sense. But you need to know the rules. You need to know the expectation. Imagine if you're in the exam and they say, move your hand from in front of your mouth. Think, oh, that's right. I read that rule. Sorry, you're absolutely right. Okay. It doesn't bother you. Let's just keep going because you know that that was what one of the rules was. Now imagine if you didn't read the rules, you put your hand in front of your mouth, they put a message on the screen, remove your hand in front of your mouth. What? Wait, was that wrong? Was I not supposed to put my hand in front of, I don't understand. Now you're completely thrown. Now you aren't even sure what's going on. Is there something else I shouldn't be doing that I am doing? You're now nervous about everything else. So the knowledge is power in this case. Read through the set of rules. They're well documented. They're on the CompTIA website. Technically, I think the Pearson VUE website. Read through those. Make sure you're familiar with them because if you know what they expect of you, there's not going to be any surprises. Even if you run into a case where you did something that was outside the scope of this and they give you a little bit of a warning, make sure you are familiar. So that's another thing to think about. There are some nuances and issues with different operating systems. With some operating systems may work better than others. I would highly recommend that you read through the exam experiences that people have had in the CompTIA subreddit. I think that's a great place to go. If I was going to take an exam, I have about 3 or 4 exam centers that are in my metropolitan area where I happen to live. And that I would go to an in-person exam center probably every time. I just feel like that's a good way to study. There are exams that my family members have taken. They've taken it at home. So it really also depends on your personal comfort with these. I'm much more comfortable in a testing center than I would be sitting in my home. So consider that too. You want to find the thing that works the best for you. You want a process and a set of procedures that put you at ease. You want to make sure that the entire testing from beginning to end is something that is not going to be a surprise or be confusing to you. So do whatever makes sense for you. Everybody has a different way of working. Everybody has a different set of expectations. Everybody has a different level of anxiety. Find the one that fits best so that you have the best chance possible for passing your exam, and I think you'll be fine. Well, I think that brings us to well overtime. We went a little bit over the overtime this time. We went over overtime, but I think that was worth it. We had a lot of great questions and even more that we just weren't able to get to in this particular version of our live study groups, but we have more study group next month. We can do some more questions. You're welcome to submit those at any time when we get this study group started, and I'm more than happy to take those from you. If there's something more specific or something you need answered before then, you're always welcome to go to our website and click the Contact Us link that is at the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Those all come to me. I get to read through every single one of those. So if you have a question, I'm more than happy to address anything that might come up that I might be able to help with. Hopefully it's something we can answer very quickly and easily for something you might have. Thank you for being here in this first hour. Thank you for the time that you spend With us, we have such a good time with these questions and answers. Sometimes they're a little bit of a surprise. Sometimes they're things we weren't expecting to see. And we get such great questions from you in the after show. We can't help but have fun with that. Want to thank everybody for your ongoing support. Don't forget about our 701 study materials on our website. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. You might even want to consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And of course, check in for our calendar to know when the next live event is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.